your resignation letter. And let me just quote from it. You talk about how you noticed signs of illiberalism on campus quite early. Students refusing to engage with different points of view. Questions from faculty at diversity trainings that challenged the approved narratives were instantly dismissed. Those who asked for evidence to justify new institutional policies were accused of, quote, microaggressions. And professors were accused of bigotry for assigning canonical texts written by philosophers who happen to have been European and male. 95% of those right there are about the process starting to erode. No questions can be asked. No pushback is allowed. No requests for data or evidence will be tolerated.
Right. And I think the thing to know is that that's by design. And the idea is from Aubrey Lord, the master's tools cannot disassemble the master's house. So the master's house is patriarchy, misogyny, privilege, oppression. And the goal is to not let those processes be allowed, to systematically discredit them, because you can't disable the patriarchy and systemic oppression by the very tools that got you there. And the tools, reason, epistemic adequacy, which basically means knowing what we're talking about, evidence, all of the due process, all of the tools that we use to build a society that you and I think are wonderful and the freest society the world has ever seen. They want to prevent people from using those tools. And that's not a small thing, because they're teaching people that. They're teaching students that.
Yeah, we saw this over the Black Lives Matter protests after George Floyd, where these sweeping statements would be made about how black men can't leave their house in America without getting shot every day, which isn't true, by the police. And when you would confront these advocates with facts about police shootings and actually how they've gone down, and the number is, last year I think it was 12 of unarmed black men who were killed by police out of 10 million, 11 million encounters with police and arrests. You would get scolded as having said something bigoted, and your response is like, facts? You mean facts are bigoted? And the answer is yes. So, that's what they say.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. So when I wrote How to Have Impossible Conversations, so the literature is very clear about this. When you, quote unquote, confront someone with facts or evidence, it elicits what's called the backfire effect. And that is that people hunker down in their beliefs and become more confident in them. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do instead is I like to ask people a question. And the litmus test question that I have is, in 2019, because that's the last data point that I had, but I think there's something more recent than that. How many unarmed black men were killed by police? Now, when you ask someone that, it's kind of a scale for wokeness. I asked one of my neighbors in Portland, and she told me 22,500.
In a year?
That's what she said. Yeah, 22,500. I've also asked other people. They've said 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. So the problem is that people are coming into they're formulating their beliefs not only not on the basis of evidence, but just wildly untethered to reality. And that skews the whole belief system they have. It changes the way they view the system and the process. So, if 22,500 unarmed black men, that's basically a Holocaust, were being killed by the police every year. That's just an astonishing way to think about the world. Mm-hmm. But I think
it's under 2 dozen. I mean, this past year, the year before, under 2 dozen. You see different numbers based on how many they include, but the Washington Post has been keeping a running tally. Could be 12, could be 15, could be 18 or 19. But in no event over the past couple of years has it been over 20. And you do see stats like, more than die in car accidents again, car accidents. That's thousands and thousands of people die, black men die in black people. Anyway, so we're seeing it not just at the university, we're seeing it across the board, where facts are considered bigoted just for being facts that contradict the narrative.
Can we linger on that for a second?
Please.
So the reason that facts doesn't do, so these young people in general are being taught that their lived experience is more important than the facts. So if there's a conflict between and that's the word that's used from the literature, lived experience must always trump facts. And if you bring up the facts, then you're being hurtful to them. It's an issue. It's called safetyism. It's an issue of their safety.
Yeah, no, I know this. We talked about this when Piers Morgan had his argument on the set on Good Morning Britain, where he was saying Meghan Markle's claiming that her son's not getting a royal title because of the color of his skin. And the response, and Piers was saying, that's not true. This has been in the cards. Whatever's going to happen to the little baby, Archie, was going to happen long before he was even born. And the weather guy who was out there giving Piers a hard time said, but that's her lived experience.
Exactly.
Who cares?
Exactly.
I don't care for lived experiences. She's the actual Queen of England. She isn't.
Right. But that's what happens when you start privileging, when you tell everybody, oh, your lived experience is more important. That's your reality. In philosophy, you call it a subjective turn. It's the turn towards subjectivity. It's making everybody's lived experience trump anything in reality. The problem is that we have to live together as a society, right? So you can't have someone walking around think, well, you can, and we do to a certain extent, thinking that they're Queen of England or they're entitled to something. But when we've taught a whole generation of people this, and now we're reaping the consequences. So those ideas, we know where they come from. It's not a mystery. They come from the university system.